Okay, hello and welcome to the Great Wave Podcast. This is episode 4, and today I'm going to be talking with Trixie Pacis.
Hi, and thank you so much for having me here. My name is Trixie Pacis, and I'm a Filipina Canadian filmmaker, photographer, and director of programming at ChimeTV. I'm currently based in Kimberley, British Columbia, which is a small mountain town, and I get to make films and share stories from the AAPI community remotely working from here.
Yeah, and that's like a really multi-hyphenate kind of title there. So you do a lot of things, as you just said. You are part of Chime TV. You work on writing, photography, filmmaking. So where did you kind of get these passions from or interests in all of these areas?
That's a great question, and it's a bit of a long winded answer. I think, in short, it's that I'm very drawn to different mediums, and I've had the opportunity to explore them throughout my career. But I went to university for literature and poetry, and so things started on the writing end of the spectrum for me. But I had the opportunity after graduating to live in Los Angeles and stumbled into the film world there as an intern. That was the first time I kind of got to read a screenplay for a film and immediately was drawn to that world and the opportunity to write stories for TV. So throughout my career, I worked at a talent agency as an assistant and then moved to a production company called Drive Films based in Vancouver. And that's where I got to see the whole process of a film being made from the development stages where you have an idea on a piece of paper through development, screenwriting, pre-production, production, and post. And it was magical to see something come to life and to be a part of it all, throughout the whole process. So I think that really inspired the direction that I wanted to take things in, especially because I enjoyed parts of each phase of the process. And I really liked writing and screenwriting that's kind of building on my original background. But then when I was on set for a project, I really liked, seeing what the camera team was doing and getting hands-on with the camera myself, shooting photography and videography behind the scenes as part of the marketing of the film. And so I think from there, I just took every opportunity that I could to learn about these different aspects of the process. And if you kind of fast forward to where I am now, I get to do a lot of development work at Chime TV. I've worked on screenplays for other producers, and I'm also, writing, directing, and producing my own projects and doing some photography on the side. And it sounds like a lot to balance, but I think as a freelancer, projects do come and go, and it creates an opportunity to kind of turn your attention in different directions, but still kind of move forward as you learn something from each experience. I hope that makes
Yeah,
sense.
no, definitely, that makes sense. So you said that you majored in literature in college, and that's kind of how you started your journey was with writing and I guess
Mhm.
storytelling as well. Had you always had an interest in storytelling, like as a child, or how did that part of your kind of journey develop?
I think I was inspired by an aunt of mine who was a children's book author. I do think I always loved storytelling. I always loved reading. I devoured books as a kid. And I think through high school and university, it was just something that came naturally and it made sense to pursue. So I kind of fell into it just out of genuine interest, I think.
Yeah, no, totally. And were there any like authors or of course other than your aunt books or even films when you kind of transitioned into the world of more writing films and screenwriting that kind of influenced you on this journey?
I read so many books in university, and
Mm-hmm.
one that sticks out, which the genre isn't necessarily one that I was typically drawn to, but we read Fight Club in a university class, and one of the
Mm,
assignments we had was to read the book and watch the film and
interesting.
discuss, the adaptation. And I think that whole semester we looked at adaptations from book to film, and most people just watched the film and read the book, but I actually was able to find the screenplay, and I think that's really what sparked an interest. So that's, I think, one title that stands out, but there are many.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's so interesting. So you actually like searched for the screenplay of it or
For older films, you can actually search, the name of the film, screenplay, PDF, and sometimes it comes up,
oh,
especially for older films that have already been made and been distributed. And,
oh,
for anyone who's curious about reading a screenplay, that's a good way to find them, and, you can also find threads and discussions or kind of blog articles that break these screenplays down, and, uh, there is a lot of structure and technique behind them, and it's a fascinating, you know, art form to understand and learn about, to me at least.
um after college, how did you begin your career and I guess end up in LA where you were able to see the film world?
Yeah, so when I was in university, I studied abroad in Paris for a semester and, met a boyfriend there, and he was based in Los Angeles, and so when I graduated, we had been doing long distance for a while, and I just spent a
Mhm.
summer, down in LA. I registered at Los Angeles City College so that I could do a few months of internships, and that's really how I got the experience in the film industry. It was at an intern or as an intern at a talent agency called Sanders Armstrong Caserta in Santa Monica. And like I said earlier, that was where I had my first opportunity to read screenplays and write script coverage, which, for anyone who doesn't know what script coverage is, it's writing a summary and an analysis of the screenplay for your agent or for your producer so that, um, they can kind of get a quick understanding of what the script is about and if it's, worth their time to dive into and read.
Mhm.
So looking at scripts from a more analytic perspective, I realized that there's a whole business associated with this. It's not just for fun, which you can do as you're learning, but there actually is a career path that relates to uh, scripts and film. And I think I grew up in a fairly traditional Filipino family where my parents wanted me to go to university and get an MBA and have a, quote, career.
Mhm.
And so doing this internship, I realized that there are careers in film and writing that I hadn't ever thought of pursuing.
Yeah, no, definitely. Kind of on that topic of being a Filipina woman in these creative industries, kind of a two-pronged question, but how did being Filipina culturally affect you? And then of course, being perceived as an Asian woman in a time where representation in general wasn't as high, and of course, stereotypes were very high and biases. How did those two sides affect you in being, you know, in this industry?
That's a great question. I think I've been very fortunate where I don't feel like I've experienced, in your face bias
Mhm,
coming up through my career. I think part of that is, um, I grew up in Vancouver, which is a very multicultural city, and certainly this might not be the experience for other people, but I was quite lucky to feel very kind of accepted and supported as a
mhm,
person. But I don't think I was very in touch with my roots as a Filipina Canadian. I was born in the Philippines and my family
mm,
immigrated in 1995, so I was 6 years old when I moved to Canada, and, speaking English already, I think that I fit in quite easily, but I know
mhm,
my parents, stopped speaking Filipino at home, and we had, connection to our relatives back home, we'd visit from time to time, but I didn't grow up really expressing my Filipino roots. So early in my career, it actually didn't have, there wasn't a very strong connection between my Filipino heritage and what I was doing at work. I was, I think, just like anybody else, trying to gain experience in the film industry and trying to turn it into a career. I didn't really see Asian stories being told around me the way that they're, certainly starting to be told in Hollywood and in the film industry now. But at the same time, I think my preoccupation was really with just learning and getting the skills to make it a career. And the stories that I wanted to tell weren't really about my cultural heritage. That came over time. I think as I've gotten older, I've realized how important it is for me to get back in touch with my roots. I also did a semester abroad in the Philippines. I went to the university that my dad went to, and that was the start of cultivating a stronger connection with Filipino culture. I started to relearn the language that I'd stopped speaking when we moved to Canada, and
Mm,
started becoming familiar with Filipino folk tales and stories and storytelling traditions. Over time, I've spent more and more time in the Philippines and really learned the language. And now one of the projects that I'm working on is really about celebrating those Filipino roots and connections in the mountain community that I live in, which is, unlike Vancouver, predominantly a Western white community.
yeah. So kind of talking about, creating representation for Filipinas and Filipinos. Can you tell me a little bit about this project that you're working on?
Yeah. So the one of the documentary films that I'm working on is called Ahon, which is a Tagalog word that means to rise or emerge or kind of break through a barrier. And this is a short film about a Filipino Canadian mountaineering club called K8. They're based out of Calgary, Alberta. And
Mhm,
the mission of this club is really to equip new immigrants to Canada who are Filipino to access the mountains and to have equal access to the mountains here, which means providing a community to safely access the mountains with, providing gear and equipment, and also providing education. For example, avalanche safety training or for wilderness first aid. So when Filipinos come to Canada, and we I think they make up the third largest Asian immigrant population here. A
mhm,
lot of them don't have the experience in snow or other kind of mountain terrain that we have here.
mhm.
But there's also so much that can be gained from accessing these places and recreating. So the film really highlights what this mountaineering club is doing, and I'm telling the story through my perspective because this mountaineering club has given me an opportunity to actually engage in the mountains with other Filipinos. It's the first time in my life that I've been able to be out in the mountains and practicing Tagalog or eating Filipino food, and it's really been a great experience for me to reconnect with my culture. And I want other people in in the mountain community to see what Filipino culture is all about. It's, I think, relatively unknown.
Yeah. Yeah, no, is that a project that you're working on individually, or is that part of Chime TV?
This one is a personal passion project of my own. So at the moment, we are in pre-production. We have filmed a little bit of the project, and it's just me filming it while I'm out with this mountaineering club for the moment. But we have
Mm,
applied to grants for funding, and we do plan on carrying out production through this spring and summer. And
alright.
it is a potential project that Chime TV might, license down the road. Uh, but things that I'm working on, films that I'm working on the ground here are things that I'm doing independently.
Yeah, no, definitely, that makes sense. Um, kind of on other filmmaking projects you've done, I know that you've worked as a co-producer and director of both film Flowers and Wild Ariel. Can you tell me a little bit about those and any other projects that you've worked on?
Yeah, for sure. So whereas the film about the Filipino Mountaineering Club is more about my culture as a Filipino Canadian, the other two documentary projects I'm working on similarly express voices in the outdoor and mountain industry that aren't as frequently heard, but they focus more on our experiences as women in the mountains. So
Mhm,
Wildflowers blends backcountry adventure, hiking, paddling primarily, with
mhm,
some historical research, and it explores the stories of two mountain riders who are living a century apart. One woman is a Canadian historical figure by the name of Mary Schaefer Warren, and the second woman is an author who lives in Banff, and her name is Megan J. Ward. Megan is essentially trying to unravel the story of this historical figure, writer, and explorer who lived in the same town that she lives in, but lived there
Mhm.
100 years before. And this
Mhm.
historical figure really paved the way for women to be exploring the backcountry. She did it in a time where, there weren't roads through as many places as there are now, and most of the exploration and mapping of this new territory was done by men. And yet,
Mhm.
she went out into the backcountry on horseback for months at a time. And she was also an artist. She wrote about her experiences. She was a photographer. She produced these incredible lantern slides, which are images taken on glass. So imagine, horsepacking in Rocky Mountain terrain with photographs on glass, and she would
Mhm.
take them back and paint them by hand. And today they represent some of the most important images that we have of these places from that time period. So it's taking a look at the contributions of this woman who was, really working in a time where it was unheard of for women to be involved in that way, but also, taking a step back and looking at her story, given what we know now about the effects that this kind of colonization had on indigenous populations and on the wilderness itself. And the other film that I'm working on is also a short documentary film. It follows an adventure aerialist named Sasha Galitzki. She is a ski mountaineer, but she is also an aerial acrobat. And she, realizing that she didn't quite fit in either world 100%, she started doing her own thing and combining these two very different activities. So the film follows her into the wilderness, onto glaciers, into ice canyons, and she rigs aerial silks there and performs acrobatic routines. And what she's trying to do is really spread the message of how fragile these ice scapes are. Here in Canada, our glaciers are melting at quite a rapid pace
Mhm.
due to climate change. And so her art is really trying to raise awareness around that.
Mhm. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I think, they're quite different subjects, but at the heart of all of them, and for me as a filmmaker, my kind of goal or mission and vision is to share stories that haven't previously been heard and to share perspectives that don't always, get attention in the outdoor industry where a lot of films are about skiing hard lines and doing things as fast as possible. I think those films are exciting and fun to watch. I certainly enjoy watching them, but I think there are other aspects of the human experience that are worth exploring as it relates to our relationship with our environment.
Yeah, and a lot of your work in general kind of focuses on the environment, especially the environment where you live.
Mhm.
Um, and so kind of where did that interest in documenting different stories about the environment and showing people's relationships with the environment, where did that interest and passion come from?
It really all started a few years ago in conjunction with the pandemic. So most of my career
Mm,
has taken place in Los Angeles and Vancouver, where there's a thriving film community, TV, feature films, commercial.
mhm,
And during the pandemic, I found myself living in a small ski town in eastern British Columbia in the Rocky Mountains
mhm,
without a massive film community. Our,
mhm.
our town has about 8,000 people. There's
Oh,
one
wow.
traffic light. We're surrounded by mountains, and that industry just doesn't exist here.
Mhm.
But what does exist here is a thriving outdoor community and a lot of outdoor films. We're just 3 hours away from Banff, where the Banff Mountain Film Festival is held every year. And the Banff Center offers adventure filmmaker workshops. So in the spring of 2020, I attended a workshop virtually, and part of the workshop was creating, pitching, and shooting a short adventure film. And
Mhm.
the story that I pitched was Wildflowers, And
Mm.
from there, it just felt like something that I was very passionate about seeing through to completion. And so today, we're actually in the post production phase. We should have our first assembly by the end of March, and we're aiming to have a completely finished film by August this year.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah,
That's very
and
cool.
I think the other part of that equation is just having discovered the outdoors for myself. When my family moved to Canada from the Philippines, we didn't hike, we didn't camp, we didn't do outdoorsy things. It's something that I
Mhm.
stumbled into in my mid 20s, and it's really something that's brought me a lot of joy, community, and peace. When I was 26, I found out that I have something called Lynch syndrome, which is a genetic predisposition to colon and ovarian cancer.
Mhm.
And I think part of the way that I coped with that was, you know, connecting with nature and the wilderness and the outdoors. And it's brought a lot of things to my life. It's hard to put into words. And I think making these films is kind of my way of putting that gratitude into words.
Yeah. Kind of like a question unrelated to, film, but more with nature. How do you think this process has been able to maybe change your relationship with nature, and how do you think humans should interact with nature or coexist with nature?
I think I come from a very privileged place where I can spend quality amounts of time in nature. And, this world that we live in is very fast paced. We're very connected to each other. I constantly work on a laptop or on a phone. And when I can take a weekend to fully immerse in nature and get somewhere that doesn't have Wi Fi service or phone signal, I always come back feeling completely reset and refreshed. And
Mhm.
I think that I think that it's good for the soul. I think it's good for your body, but not everybody has the opportunity or the inspiration to have those experiences. And so
Mhm.
I think if we can, talk in the mainstream media a little bit more about the health benefits, the emotional benefits of spending time in nature, I think it could benefit more people. And I think a lot of what we see about the outdoors is very extreme, but
Mhm.
there are other ways to get out there that can be simple and accessible for everybody. You
Yeah.
don't have to be a sponsored athlete. You don't have to go somewhere dangerous. And we don't really see that in the media. So I think for me, realizing that for myself, it's just a message that I want other people to hear.
Yeah. No, definitely that makes sense. So as we said in the beginning, you are a, multi-hyphenate. You do a lot of different things. And so now I want to talk about your photography. So, you focus a lot on landscapes, in your photography. Where did that passion come from? Did that also come from, the pandemic?
Well, I think my passion for photography in general really started with my dad. He was a photographer and he gifted me my first camera when I was younger. And it's something that I took with me when I studied abroad and traveled. So my first love was really travel photography and photographing
Mm.
other places and other cultures and other people. And again, when I moved to this, mountain town during the pandemic, nature was what I had to shoot, and it kind of coincided with a growing confidence to get deeper into these wilderness areas. And I mean, there isn't much that's more beautiful than what Mother Nature has created. So I think what I enjoy about landscape photography is that it gives you an opportunity to really look at your surroundings and appreciate them. To see how the light interacts with the land and how all of these different elements come together. And I think it creates a sense of just awe and wonder. And it's something that I like to try to communicate through photography.
You are kind of speaking on your travel photography as well. You've been to many, many places. Where did your love for travel and going, discovering different places? where did that come from? And kind of where did your passion for, seeing new places come from?
That definitely came from my mom. When my family moved to Canada, my mom was a recording artist in the Philippines. She was
Mm.
actually a very popular pop star in the Philippines, and my parents
Oh,
decided
wow.
to move to Canada because they wanted me and my sister to be educated in Canada and have different opportunities than what
Mhm,
they had in the Philippines. And so my mom, quit or kind of left her career and moved to Canada thinking that that was, over for her. But when she moved to Canada, she realized that there actually was a market for her to tour as an artist. So many Filipinos have moved to Canada and the US. And so she started singing again. And my parents couldn't afford, daycare or a babysitter. So my mom would pull me and my sister out of school and take us with her. And so we would just tag along, and if we were well behaved while she was doing rehearsal and the concert, we'd usually have a day of sightseeing together. And I think that's really where my passion for seeing new places started. And throughout the rest of my life, through school, I think my parents really encouraged that having life experience was just as valuable as an education. Both were important. So I took as many opportunities as I could. I know I worked through university, and a lot of what I saved up for were these travel experiences. Yes, it is actually so. My mom celebrated the 40th anniversary of her music career a few years ago, and
mhm,
because of the pandemic, she wasn't able to have a concert where people could attend. So she
mhm,
wanted to do a virtual concert, and it was such an amazing opportunity to direct it for her. It was a small crew. It was me and another director of photography operating three cameras inside a recording studio. But it was the first time I got to work with my mom on a professional level. I think
mhm,
she's been a big inspiration for me pursuing the arts in general.
mhm.
And, it was also the first time I got to, tell her what to do and direct her, which was a fun role reversal.
Yeah,
But yeah, we filmed, her 40th anniversary concert, which, people watched online, during the pandemic.
that's very nice. So you have spoken about how you got inspiration from both your parents. Um, do you think that your family is, has been obviously very important? Are they still part of your journey in filmmaking and being a photographer and writing?
I do think that they'll always be part of the journey in some way. They definitely were strong influences, and a lot of the opportunities that I have now, I really do attribute to my parents and the decisions and the sacrifices that they made. They're not maybe involved on a day-to-day level with the work that I do, but, one cool thing is, my mom is very experienced when it comes to music,
Mhm.
and as we work on these projects in post-production, she's definitely someone that I'm gonna go to with advice on, composing and music for my projects. I think it'll be another cool way to get to work together.
Yeah, no, definitely. That makes sense. That's very nice. Going back to your travel photography, is there a favorite place that you've ever been, or is there, a specific photo that you really like of yours?
I think one of my favorite places that I've been fortunate to photograph was India. I spent
Mhm,
6 months backpacking in India, and each corner of the country is so different and so distinctly unique, and it's just a vibrant place with so much going on. I think it can be overwhelming for people if it's their first time visiting, and if they haven't been somewhere similar, but I think
mhm.
photography really encouraged me to slow down and observe these small details within very large scenes. It definitely was a very exciting and stimulating place to photograph. I don't know if there's necessarily one image that comes out, but one place that does come to mind is Leh in the northern part of the Himalayas in India.
Mhm.
It just felt like a very remote place You kind of had this feeling that you were seeing something that not many people have seen, and something that has a timelessness to it, that it's not changed as rapidly as the rest of the world,
Yeah.
and that just felt pretty special.
Yeah, and that seems to be, a theme in a lot of your work is uncovering images or films that a lot of the world or other people haven't really focused on. How has this kind of, journey to do this, how has this influenced where you've gone career-wise, where now you talk about stories focused on API people who've often also not had, their stories told, or the world hasn't really heard about their stories. Has there been a connection there for you?
Probably on a very subconscious level. I think hearing you say that just now has kind
Mhm,
of connected some dots for me. I don't think I necessarily set out to make these films or tell these stories with a plan, but I think as
mhm,
opportunities have come up, I've just gravitated towards them. Um, but it is something that I'm becoming more and more intentional about. I think part of that is just seeing that there is an opportunity, seeing other people start paving the way for more AAPI stories to be told is very inspiring. And I'm realizing that I'm now in a position in my career where I can actually be a part of that and be a part of making change. So I think, we're talking about this in a time where I'm starting to really find my voice. And, I've been working for, since 2003, and it has taken a while to really figure out what stories are important to me, and what topics and themes I want to explore. I think a lot of people feel pressure to figure it out right away, but it really comes with time and experience, and I'm starting to realize that now. I used to put a lot of pressure on myself when I was younger, make something, write something, you should have something to talk about or to say. But now I'm understanding that it does take time, and
yeah.
it's worth the journey and the effort.
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense. AAPI representation, especially in film, has really skyrocketed in the last few years. We've had movies such as Shang-Chi, Raya and the Last Dragon, Minari, Parasite, Everywhere, Everything, Everything Everywhere, All at Once, and more kind of be at the tops of pop culture and, fame. So, how do you think this trajectory of representation for API people, how do you see it going in the future? And specifically, what role do you think you with Chime TV can have in it?
That's a great question. I think, all of the films that you listed have definitely been an inspiration and much needed in, you know, in pop culture. Um, and I think that the trajectory is, I think a good example of where I think the trajectory is going is the series Beef. It
Mm,
featured an all Asian cast. It was written by an Asian screenwriter. There were definitely elements of Asian culture involved, but it wasn't on the nose, super Asian in the way that, other films are. And I
mhm,
think what that tells us is that, Asian people just live everyday life and have the same experiences as other minority groups or cultural groups. And that you can cast, an all Asian cast in a film that's not necessarily about being Asian. So I think
mhm,
that I hope that we'll see more of that, where roles will go to someone Asian because they're the best person for the role and not because they're an Asian actor.
mhm. No, yeah,
And I think
definitely.
Yeah, and I think where Chime TV can play a role in all of this is, creating a home for Asian content where people can find it easily. I know that there's a lot of Asian content on other channels and streamers, especially big ones like Netflix, but you know, they're not as driven by the mission as we are, and so as a cable channel, we also have a subscription product, similar to Netflix. We're also entering the FAST space, and the over the air space. Um, I think that as an omni channel, we really do have an opportunity to create a home for AAPI content and also cultivate the next generation of AAPI content creators, writers, filmmakers, directors, and talent.
Definitely. What are some projects that Chime TV has worked on do you think are kind of maybe your favorites or some things in progress that you have going that you think are really working towards, that representation kind of as an API
Mhm.
media company?
So in December of 2023, Chime TV had the opportunity to broadcast the Unforgettable Gala for the first time in its history. And the Unforgettable Gala, or UNFO as it's known,
Mhm.
is one of the longest, it's the longest running Asian awards show. It's a big celebration of what our community has accomplished in the entertainment industry. So to be a part of broadcasting that nationally on television for the first time was really, really exciting for all of us at the company.
Yeah, no, definitely. And there's just so many, films and TV shows that Chime TV is working on and producing. Do you have any, personal favorites or ones that you've worked on that you're really proud of?
I think that I've signed an NDA, so I can't quite spill the beans
Uh,
on the things that we're developing, but I can kind of tease that we have been looking at working with social media creators, and I think
mm,
one of the exciting things about social media is that it's given opportunity for everyday people to to be seen and for their voices to be heard. There's a
mhm,
lot of negative things about social media, but there's also some positives in that people with something to say have a platform that's not expensive or inaccessible. And so, we're seeing a lot of cool content being made, and we're hoping to or in the process of working with some people that we've found that are doing cool things in the social media space and are seeking, broader distribution on other platforms beyond social.
um, kind of a last thought is with Chime TV, with your work, your personal projects, and everything that you do, where do you have, what are your current goals and hopes for the future? Not, personal goals as well as just community goals for where we could see representation go further and where you'd like to see yourself in the next 5, 10, or even 20 years.
Oh, wow. Big question. I think, the first thing that comes to mind when you say personal goal is finishing these films.
Mhm.
Wildflowers has been in the making for 3 years, and, we're getting close to completing it, and I think for me, the opportunity to see something through for myself from start to finish is something that I'm focusing on at the moment. So there's a short-term goal. I have no idea what I'll be doing in 20 years, um, but that's totally okay with me. I think the goal is to just take opportunities as they come and to continue to find ways to be expressive creatively, regardless of what that looks like. And in terms of our community, I think I'd love to see different groups within the Asian community really come together and
Mm,
support each other, and
yeah.
celebrate what makes us diverse and what makes each group different and unique.
Mm, yeah, totally. I completely agree with you. Um, that's all my questions for you, but I really appreciate you coming and sitting down with me and, talking about your journey through this world and your work with representation in media. I think it's all very important and yeah, thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I really am a big fan of what you're doing, and I'm excited to keep following your journey too.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening and goodbye.